Hi everyone, welcome back to Ontology Explained. I'm Casey Hart, and today we're going to be covering the open world assumption. Turns out we don't know everything. To talk about the open world assumption, we first need to define it, as well as its counterpart, the closed world assumption. We'll look at some examples of when to use each, and then I'll give you some practical advice on how to pick which assumption to use at which times in your data, in your applications. The closed world assumption is easier to define first, and this says we know everything. If something cannot be proven in a given model, it's false. The world is closed. This means that the model is complete. So, for example, say that we were looking at all of the Super Bowls that have been won in the history of the NFL. We could look at all of those and we can ask the question, did the Bills win the Super Bowl? It's false that the Bills won the Super Bowl. Why? Because we don't have any occurrences where they won it. We know all of the results, and none of them are wins for the Bills. Sorry, I should have put like a trigger warning or something in here, but I think you know it's been a tough go of it. But you're good now, so hold out some hope. The open world assumption, on the other hand, says that we don't know everything. So if there's something that can't be proven in a given model, its truth value is just unknown. It's not false. The model is incomplete. We know there are things that are true outside of what we can prove in the model, and so if we can't declare a specific thing true or declare it false based on the model, we shrug, we're open. Could be either way. Say a doctor is looking at my medical charts and I come in and I say, I've got this really bad twisted ankle, and they're like, I'm sorry, I'm looking at your chart here and it doesn't say anything about a twisted ankle, so you must not have one. This would be terrible. They'd be misusing the charts, right? Of course, there are things about my health that are not included in the medical charts that they're holding. They need to use the open world assumption, at least with respect to whether my ankle's twisted or not. Let's look at a couple more detailed examples where the open world assumption shines and where the closed world assumption shines. I went on a beach vacation the other day. It was lovely. I swam in the ocean. We built sand castles, had some delicious clam chowder. We went hunting for shells. It was a lovely time. There's the story, but I have a question for you. Did I sleep? Well, according to the open world assumption, maybe. I told you some things that happened on my vacation, but I didn't have to tell you everything that happened on my vacation. And according to the closed world assumption, no. The model says, these are the things that I did, and none of them is listed as sleeping, so I didn't sleep. Of course, we should be using the open world assumption here. When I give you a even pretty detailed accounting of what I did over my vacation, I'm going to omit a lot of the boring details. The closed world assumption gets it wrong because it assumes that in that story, everything that I do would have to be enumerated, and I'm not going to be telling you about every single breath I did, every single bite of food I had. That's just unrealistic and unreasonable. Let's consider another case. In interrogation, someone's ex-girlfriend has been murdered, and the police come and pick them up, take them to the interrogation room, and ask them, what did you do after you got off of work last night? And they need to be pretty careful. They say, well, I got gas, and then I grabbed some groceries before I went home, made a homemade dinner, watched some Netflix, went to bed. That's the rest of the story. And then we all have seen enough procedural TV shows where I get 90% of my information about police officers, and they say, aha, then why do we have this video of you at the library? We caught you. Well, the closed world assumption says that they lied. We can look at all of the things that they said they did, and none of those things are go to the library. So if we have video of them at the library, then they lied to us. The open world assumption would say they didn't lie, right? They told us some things that were true, and maybe there were other things true that they left off of the list. Which assumption should the police be using in this circumstance? I think it's pretty clear that they should use the closed world assumption. They asked for information about where the person was, and that sort of has an implied weight to it that you tell us everything. Don't leave anything out. Certainly don't leave out any major public places that you went to, places where the murdered party might have been. And so we shouldn't use the open world assumption. We shouldn't give them the benefit of the doubt in this case. Maybe we're not talking about going to the beach in your enterprise. We're not talking about whether you committed a homicide. Instead, you want to know, how should I handle my data? Should I use the open world assumption? Should I use the closed world assumption? Which one? Let's look at a couple of different examples. So in healthcare, I gave one example of this earlier. When you're looking at my healthcare charts, we don't assume that you know everything about my health. I might have a sprained ankle. I might have left out some family history, even though I gave you some family history. I might have recently acquired some new sickness. I didn't have the flu last time I was in, but I got the flu recently. Those sorts of things. So healthcare, we have an open world assumption. A lot of the times we don't know everything. But there are some contexts where the closed world assumption makes sense in healthcare. You might have my complete vaccination records, and then it's pretty easy for you to say, we know all the times that you've been vaccinated and you haven't had an MMR vaccine, something like that. Now consider looking at payroll. A company often has good reason to think they have all the information about some employee's payroll. The organization is in control of writing the paychecks, so you know how many hours the employee has worked, you know how many paychecks you sent out to them, you know what the withholding is. In that case, we don't think there's any missing information. It might be pretty safe to use the closed world assumption. It might actually even be bad to use the open world assumption, because if we know we have all of your records and we don't see a paycheck for that month, we can't say, well, you might have been paid and we just don't know about it, right? We can be stronger than that. We can say, we know all the paychecks we sent out, we didn't send one out to you, and so we owe you that paycheck. And lastly, let's consider vehicle data. So let's say that you are Ford or Dodge and you have information about your trucks that are coming back from sensors within the vehicle. They tell you how fast they're driving. They tell you how many people are sitting in the seats. Should we think that we have a closed or an open world assumption? And here it's just not very clear to me. I need to know how thorough is the data. What types of questions are we asking? Are we just asking how far did the vehicle travel? In that case, if the computer is on the whole time and returning all of the velocity information, then we should be pretty confident that we have all the information we need. We could use the closed world assumption. If we need to know how many pounds were in tow by the truck, maybe we just don't have that data, and then we need to use the open world assumption. So the moral is, when in doubt, be safe, use the open world assumption. And RDF OWL uses that open world assumption. And the reason for this is you'll never get anything false by using the open world assumption. If I know some piece of information, then I can declare it. And if I don't know whether a piece of information is true, I shrug my shoulders and say, I'm not sure. There might be things that are true outside of what my model gives me. But when we're sure our data model is complete, then we can use the closed world assumption locally, and we should be explicit about it. What does it mean to locally use the closed world assumption? It means we have a closed world just with respect to the things that we know everything about. So if we go back to the healthcare example, if I know I have a complete vaccination record, then I can use the closed world assumption to say that this patient didn't get a particular vaccine. But that's just local to vaccines. I might have to leave it open with respect to other things, like does that patient have the flu or did they get it this year? Does that patient have a twisted ankle? You should also protect yourself with tests. So if you're going to use the closed world assumption, you're making this really strong claim that I know all of the relevant facts about this specific local issue. If you're going to do that, you should run some tests to ensure that that's still the case. So you can do that in a number of ways. We could write SPARQL queries. We could write shackle shapes to help constrain our data to make sure we always have the right features. That's a topic for a separate video. We'll come back to that, how we enforce it. But the important thing is that you need to enforce it. If you're making the strong claim about your data that we have all of it, then you better make sure that you have all of it in order to draw those strong conclusions that are warranted from that. In summary, the open world assumption says that there are some things that we don't know, and if we can't prove them to be true or false strictly within our model, we'll just have to be agnostic about whether they're true or false. On the other hand, the closed world assumption is the much stronger claim that if it can't be proven true within our model, it's false. Both of those are good. Don't fall into the camp that we have to be pro or con open world assumption. Instead, you should use them carefully and use them in the right situations. And when you do that, you'll be able to get the right amount of value from your data. Thanks for watching. I hope you like and subscribe. Go ahead and put down in the comments if you have any open or closed world assumption questions, or if there are future video topics that you'd like me to cover.